Hi, welcome to Ubiquity. My name is Eugene, and today I want to talk to you about the economics of the 3080 situation. So we know that there's a shortage out until 2021. We also know that there's a scalping controversy, not only third parties who are buying at MSRP and reselling at higher prices, but also MSI, who was a board partner manufacturer of these graphics cards, also selling cards at above MSRP via a subsidiary called Starlit. I'm not going to look into the details behind what happened. Steve from Gamers Nexus did an amazing journalistic job there, uncovered the story there. So go to his channel. I'll link it below. What I will talk about is that controversy in the context of the economics, the overall economics situation of the RTX 3080. And finally, I'm also going to talk about who profits from the situation, who doesn't profit, and who loses from the situation. So let's get straight into this. We're going to start off with basic supply and demand. On the vertical axis, you've got price. On the horizontal axis, you've got quantity. I'm going to draw you two curves. First of all, I'm going to draw you the demand curve. What does that demand curve mean? It means that at a higher price, there's a low quantity that's demanded. And then at a low price, there's a high quantity that's demanded. So you then connect the two dots. And that makes sense. If something is more expensive, you're less likely to buy it. If something is cheaper, you are more likely to buy it. The second curve that I'm going to draw for you is the supply curve. And that is the opposite. At a lower price, manufacturers are less likely to produce that good because they can't profit as much. At a higher price, manufacturers are incentivized to produce more because they make more of a profit. So you draw a straight line. We're using straight line for simplicity. These are typically curves and anyways, it doesn't matter. We're using straight lines for simplicity here. What this means, what these two curves mean is at the intersection of these two curves, where they meet is what economists call the equilibrium, excuse my writing, the equilibrium price. This is the price. I'm going to draw a horizontal line right here. So this is the price at which manufacturers are incentivized to produce the amount that customers demand. You're meeting demand and supply at this price. Okay, so what happened with the RTX 3080? Well, it seems like demand is way higher than the supply. So where does that fall within this curve? The demand is higher than the supply. Here at these points under the equilibrium price, at any point here, the demand outstrips supply. So the MSRP at $700, I'm going to draw a line straight across. You're going to have a quantity demanded that is way higher than your quantity supplied. This dynamic is a shortage dynamic. So your first dynamic here is shortage. What happens when there's a shortage? Now, people, because there's a huge quantity demanded, they're going to use every single opportunity that they can get, that they can take to get their hands on this product at this price. The supply does not meet the demand. And that's where you introduce the problem of bots. So the first problem is bots and actually like just the web page is crashing. So these are the two problems: crashing websites that are caused by the shortage dynamic. So even before we talk about scalpers, you're already going to have a problem, because if I want to get my hands on a card and I want as much of an advantage as possible, I'm going to use notifications. I'm going to use alerts. I could pay, $5, $10, however much for a bot to snag me a card for myself at this price. Incidentally, I could not get my hands on this card because I was just manually F5ing. regardless, that's the incentive structure that this price that's way below the equilibrium price has created. So again, before any scalping is happening, you've already got a shortage dynamic that leads to bots and the crashing of sites. Now, there's actually a second dynamic here. So let's look at the second dynamic. At this quantity supplied, if I draw a straight line, try to draw a straight line up, there's actually going to be people who will buy this at this price point, something that's a lot higher than the equilibrium price. And here, this second dynamic is the willingness to pay dynamic. So at that quantity, there is a willingness to pay that's a lot higher than what the MSRP is. And it's this gap that leads to scalping. So with the combination of these two dynamics, you've got third-party individuals who are going to use bots, who are going to buy up the supply. And then they also know that there are people who are willing to pay something a lot more than what the MSRP is to get their hands on this card, and they're going to take advantage of that. That is the economics of the current RTX 3080 situation. So that brings me to the second point. We're going to talk about MSI, Starlit, and scalping. So if we go back here, if we go back to this chart, let's say I'm going to make up some numbers here, okay? So these are not real. I've pulled this out of thin air. Let's say the equilibrium price is $1,200, should be $1,200. And let's say the price that people are willing to pay for the current amount of supply is, let's say $1,500, right? Doesn't matter what those numbers actually are. We're just going to put them here as placeholders to make the illustration a little bit easier. So what's happening is the scalpers, right? So you've got your scalpers, if I can spell, who are selling, right? So they're selling at potentially $1,500, but their cost is $700. And so their profit is $800, right? So this money goes entirely into the pockets of the scalpers. That is not an ideal situation. Oops, sorry. What happens with MSI? What happens with MSI? Okay, so MSI, as a board partner, right? Now, again, right now, I'm not going into the ethics of a manufacturer selling at a higher price. I'm just going to explain this in the context of the economics of the situation. So MSI and Starlit. Let's assume that they're the same company, that all profits from Starlit go to MSI. So if they sell, right, at $1,500, their cost to produce is not $700. It's something lower. I'm just going to assume it's $500. All right. I'm just making up numbers. So their profit here is $1,000. Now, $1,000. Okay, you know what I mean. So the difference between this profit and this profit, the difference between these two is this money right here goes directly to the scalpers, and that's it. What MSI could feasibly do, right? Now, MSI, what they could feasibly do is they could give some to Nvidia, profit share with Nvidia, pocket some themselves. But what they can do with this is to actually use that profit to invest in additional capacity. What do I mean here? I mean, if we go back to this curve and they're selling it at a higher price, what they can do is they can invest in their manufacturing capacity to move up the curve here and produce a certain amount, right? And hopefully, if they invest in their manufacturing capacity, that's going to raise supply to enough of a level that it can meet demand. That's what they could do feasibly. And if the price were not, let's not call it 1500, right? Let's say they actually used the equilibrium price. Let's say they knew what the equilibrium price is and they use the equilibrium price, right? $1,200. So $1,200 minus $500, so that's 700 in profit that they could, again, if they invest in additional capacity. Now, again, because the price is higher, not only would Nvidia and MSI be able to invest in their capacity to produce more, what you'll also see, because the price is higher than $700, the demand is going to go down. So the quantity demanded is going to go down. And then the situation is they're going to meet somewhere at the equilibrium price, and the quantity supplied will be equal to the quantity demanded. That may actually be a good thing for customers, because now supply will be ramped up, demand will be ramped down, and they'll meet at a price point that's actually reasonable. What the problem is right now, the biggest problem, is that the scalpers are getting a profit, and nobody, not MSI, right, not Nvidia, and not the customer, everybody except for the scalpers are losing. So if MSI and Starlit can actually sell their cards at a higher cost than at a higher price than the MSRP, you might get to a situation where, from an economic standpoint, you reach the equilibrium price and the supply and quantity, or the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded will meet somewhere in the middle. The current situation where the prices are controlled, the prices are fixed, that they're staying right here in the $700 range. I'm sure there's some agreement with the AIBs that they can't go over like a certain amount of price. So their range is only from 700 to, let's say, like $900 or something like that. I'm just, again, making numbers up, but whatever that number is, it's much lower than this $1,500 number. So instead of having a situation where your quantity supplied is so low that you introduce these two dynamics, bots, people being incentivized to use bots to load and crash sites, third parties incentivized to exploit that willingness to pay, and therefore scalpers profiting. Avoid that, and you go to the option. Well, let's be more explicit here. Sorry, but I'm a little ranting a little. So option A is the current situation where scalpers win. Option B is let AIB and Nvidia raise prices and add capacity to then meet demand. To me, option B seems to make the most sense. I think where MSI rubbed most people the wrong way is that they were not open about it. If they were open about it and said, hey, yeah, we're going to sell at a higher price and it's going to let us invest in our manufacturing capacity to add enough capacity to meet demand. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to meet demand at this price. If they were open and honest about that, that probably would have gone over a lot better in the community. Although, who knows? We're assuming everybody is rational, and that's definitely not the case. So, the current situation is well, it is what it is, and it doesn't seem to be changing. So, I guess the next question is, why did they do that? Why did Nvidia choose to set the price at $700, something that's much lower than the equilibrium? There's a couple of explanations. Number one is it was a mistake. They legitimately thought that $700 was the equilibrium price. It's really, 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 really hard to find out what this price is. There's all sorts of noise in the signals. There's all sorts of noise in the data. Because if Nvidia were to survey me, I might say I'm willing to pay only $700 for the card, but when push comes to shove, and I really want the card, I could be willing to pay $1,200 for it. And so $1,200 would be the real equilibrium price if enough people thought the same way that I did. So they could have picked up on false signals and then be truly mistaken on the equilibrium price, and that's why they chose that. The second possibility is goodwill. They were trying to just generate marketing goodwill to lower the price point so that customers feel like they're going to get a bang for their buck. That's one possibility as well. And the third possibility is more nefarious. They did this on purpose. Now, I don't want to actually speculate on which of the three motives it actually was, because we can never know that. I can never know that. Only the Nvidia executives can know this, what happened. What I will say is it is very easy to make the mistake. It is not hard at all to make the mistake. There's so much noise in the data that you can never be 100% correct. Most of the time you'll be wrong, either up or down, and it happens all the time. So it's a very, very realistic possibility. Number two is goodwill as well. That's a very real possibility. Number three, on purpose. I don't want to ascribe this, but again, ascribing any of the motives is completely speculative on my end. So what I can say are, what are the facts? What happened since the launch of the RTX 3080? So we've got the launch date on September 17th. Today, as I'm recording this, it's the morning of October 8th. So I'm actually going to use market close October 7th. At September 17th, the price of Nvidia stock was something like $486. At market close October 7th, it was something like 561, I believe. So that is a gain of $75 or over 15%. And this is the Nvidia stock. At the same time, the S&P 500, it gained roughly 2% over a month. 3 weeks, right? Over the past 3 weeks, Nvidia gained over 15%, and the S&P 500 gained about 2%. So some of you might be thinking, well, Nvidia did this to profit, because clearly what happened is their stock price went way up. So they must be doing this for a profit motive. What I want to caution is the stock price has very little to do with the profitability of the company. The profitability of the company is only one aspect of this, one input into how the market reacts, and what they price the stock at. In this case, if we look at it from an economics perspective, Nvidia could have sold their RTX 3080s at this price. They did not. So they lost this shaded area in profits. They actually forfeited this much in profits, right? So the quantity times the price increase, divided by 2 because it's a triangle. That is the amount of profits that Nvidia actually forfeited by having an MSRP that's lower than the equilibrium price. So we can then look at who profited, who did not profit, and who lost in this situation, right? Number one stakeholder that lost, consumers who actually wanted to buy the card at MSRP. Most people were not able to get one. Most real people were not able to get one. So they clearly lost. Who did not profit? Now, again, if Nvidia made a mistake or they were doing this for goodwill, they did, regardless of whether they intended to do this for goodwill, they actually did get goodwill. So that's a positive for them. But the negative offset is that they actually forfeited profits for this. So Nvidia as a company did not profit from this. They forfeited profits, but they gained some goodwill. Okay, it's a wash. Who also did not profit? AIB partners. Because again, if we go back to this MSI example, only MSI was found to have been selling their cards at a higher price. And since then, they have committed to refunding the difference and no longer doing so. So they are not actually able to capture this extra profitability as well. So they did not profit as well. Who profited? Number one, scalpers. And number two, shareholders. So this, in a nutshell, is the economics of the RTX 3080 situation. You've got Nvidia who missed predicting, you've got Nvidia who set the MSRP at something that's lower than the equilibrium price, that drove the two dynamics of shortages and a gap in the willingness to pay at that supply level, which enabled scalpers and shareholders to profit. There's another possibility. In an alternate world where consumers would not have as much of a backlash with their manufacturers and Nvidia selling their cards at a higher cost, there could have been a world in which Nvidia and their partners sold at this higher cost, reinvested that capital in additional capacity, and then met customers in the middle. But for some reason, right, people are not fully economically rational. There's a lot of emotions at play when you set an MSRP. People expect that you will deliver enough quantity to meet the demand at that MSRP, even though the economics don't work out that way. And so there's a whole lot of human dynamics going on that created that creates a possible consumer backlash to manufacturers who are selling higher than MSRP, or Nvidia raising the MSRP after they had promised $700 as the MSRP. And that's why we're stuck in the situation right now where the only people who are profiting are the scalpers and the shareholders, and everyone else either does not win or they flat out lose. So that is the unfortunate situation with the RTX 3080. I hope that I was able to explain some concepts to you. I hope that you were able to learn a little bit of something. Again, if you want to learn more about the specifics of what happened and what led to this situation, go over to Gamers Nexus. I'll put a link below. And Steve has done a great job. Again, I'm gonna shout him out again. He did a great job, great piece of journalism to uncover what happened. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.